Good morning, everybody. Can you hear Uncle Gordon okay? Okay. I just want to welcome everybody to church today. I hope you enjoy the music. We had one service this morning at 8:45, and usually about 25 people there, 25 on a regular basis. So if you have a hard time coming to church at 11, you can come a little bit earlier. Wake up and then Sabbath school, and then you have the rest of the day off. But we covered this same material this morning, and what we are doing this year, for those of you who have not been here yet and haven't heard me describe this, what we're doing this year is we are looking at the life of the disciples of Jesus during the 3 years that they spent with Jesus. And the reason for that is, my goal for this church for this year, for all of us, is to grow spiritually and to grow improve in our relationship with God, and to improve who we are as people, to become a little bit better people. So, how do we do that? We talk about not being angry. We talk about being more patient. We talk about depending on God more. We talk about praying and studying and doing, just being changed. We talk about sanctification. We talk about, we all want to be different. We all want to be better. We all want to be, Jesus says, be perfect. So how do we do that? So when I look at the life of the disciples, and when I look at their experiences with Jesus, to me, these guys are like mile markers on the highway. When you're traveling in your car on the highway, there is a mile marker. And if you are going to Kansas, for example, from Denver, and you see those markers winding down, 199, 198, 197, you know how many more miles you have to the state line. So that's what they are there for, to inform us as to where we are. If you get into an accident, you can call the emergency and you can say, I'm at a mile marker such and such, and then they can find you real easy. So to me, disciples really are an example to us of this experience that we want to have with God and how we want to improve. I can't really think of anybody else in the Bible that is a better example to us in spiritual growth than disciples of Jesus. We have accounts of other people in the Bible, and they're usually descriptions of their life and things that they did, maybe one event, two events, But with disciples, you have 3.5 years of spending time with Jesus. In the Gospels, all four of them, they give a lot of detailed information about what was going on there. So in 1 week, when we started out in January, I talked about the fact about the temptation of Jesus. I just want to go chronologically to what we did. And the temptation of Jesus, the lesson in that sermon was that Jesus focused on God throughout all of the temptations that he was experiencing. In other words, he did not look left, he did not look right, he just looked to God, and that's how he was able to overcome the temptations that Satan had for him. Then we talked about the call that he made to the disciples and said, follow me, I will make you fishers of men. And the lesson that we learned there is that those guys left everything and followed Jesus. And the question for us is, do we want to leave everything and follow Jesus? And once they had the vision of where they wanted to be, of who they were going to become, they just followed Jesus. We may have a vision of something in our life that we want to change. Maybe you have a vision. I have a vision for me. Maybe you will relate to that. There's June 2nd, there is a century bicycle ride in Castle Rock, and that's when you have to ride 100 miles in one day. So my vision is that I accomplish that ride in June. That's my vision. You may have a vision to save more money, lose weight, get good grades this semester in school. You may have all kinds of visions. That's one thing. But it's a totally another thing now to work for that. It's an entirely different thing for me to now get up every day and make sure that I ride 20, 25, 30 miles every day, 4 or 5 times a week. Because in order to ride 100 miles, you have to do a whole bunch of small rides just to get in shape. Because riding 100 miles is too much, you see, in one day. So you really have to be in shape. So it's two different things to have a vision and then to actually put in the work to accomplish that vision. Disciples, they had a vision. Jesus gave them a vision. You're going to be fishers of men. But then for the next 3.5 years, Jesus is teaching them, what does it mean? How are you going to be that person, that new person, a fisher of men? Somebody who is teaching people about God. How are you going to do that? So when we are looking at this chapter today, and every other chapter and every other thing that we are going to look at this year, where Jesus is preaching to a crowd, Jesus is preaching to people on the shore of the sea, Jesus is preaching on a side of the mountain. I want you to keep one thing in mind. One of his primary audiences was the 12 disciples. He was preaching to everybody, but he especially wanted them to learn these lessons because they were going to be the ones to carry on the work after he is gone. So we need to keep that in mind. This is his audience. He's teaching them. So you have this particular chapter 6, and you have here a verse in verse 1. We'll start with it. Chapter 6 of Matthew, verse 1 says, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people." Thank you, Sarai, for putting that on screen. I didn't have PowerPoint, but she found that text in a little different version, but it's all good. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. So Jesus is trying to teach something here, okay? And in this chapter, you have now, in chapter 6 of Matthew, Jesus is talking about 3 things. 3 righteous practices that were considered righteous practices by the Jewish people. What were they? They were giving, praying, and fasting. In Jewish culture, if you did not give to the poor, you were not going to go into God's heaven. That was just assumed that you had to give. If you were not praying, you were not going to heaven. If you were not fasting, you were not going to heaven. These are the 3 things that you had to do as a Jew. These are the 3 things that Jesus is now teaching his disciples how to do and how to do it properly. So he says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. So Jesus is talking here in this chapter about the fact that we can become hypocrites in how we do things. He's not talking about, he's not talking against doing good things. He's talking about the motivation. Jesus in chapter 5, if you remember, we studied that last week, concluded and said, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. He says, I did not come to destroy the law, but to establish it, but to fulfill it. So Jesus is not saying anything that you shouldn't do these good things. You should. But the problem arises in the heart. Why are you doing them? Are you doing them for the right reason? Or are you doing them for the wrong reason? Barclay says that to the Jew, there were 3 great cardinal works of the religious life. 3 great pillars on which the good life was based. Almsgiving, prayer, and fasting. Those were the things. But now, how do you do them? Alms may be given publicly, but not for the sake of publicity. So you can give alms publicly like we just did, You just came up and gave money for the needy fund. And then when you leave, many of you are going to put your offering in the box there. So you are giving publicly, but you cannot be giving for publicity. You see? So this is Jesus is talking about motivation. We can lose the reward if we do it from the wrong motive. Once you are living a life, once you decide to follow Jesus and you start living a righteous life and you start doing good deeds, it is very easy to begin doing your acts of righteousness before men to be seen by men, to be seen by them, you see? It becomes very easy. So as Christians, we can do this. In our church here, the Arada Church, what do? We feed the homeless. We go 3 times a month. Kim and Peron, they lead out the group twice a month. And then our Indonesian church goes out there once a month, and we feed the homeless people, Denver downtown. We have a food bank. Anybody can call. We advertise the food bank on our radio program 5 times a week, and I say, if you need food, call this number, and Jasmina is going to get you what you need. And people call and come and get food. So we do good deeds. We do alms. You can, as a church, we can do that for the wrong reasons. You know, and I mentioned this in the first service. One year, maybe last year it was, we had a church that was helping us, another church, and I don't mean to criticize, but just an example, maybe a stupid example. I don't want anybody to get offended. But they had T-shirts on with the name of the church and all of that stuff, you know. And sometimes we as Christians do that. We say, we're going to go help in the neighborhood and we're going to clean this street. But we're going to put the T-shirt with our name on it and the phone number so everybody can see who we are because we want them to come to our church. Or sometimes we'll go paint somebody's house, you know, a poor person, but we may call the TV station to let them know of what the great good deed we are doing, so they would put it on the evening news that this church is doing this, you know. So on a corporate level, as a church family, we can fall prey to this hypocrisy, you know, this self-centeredness where we do it because we want somebody to notice and somebody to pay attention. And as individuals, we do the same thing. After commanding perfection, Jesus immediately warns of the subtleties of hypocrisy that can creep into our spiritual pursuit. The problem does not rest in the pursuits, but in the individual heart. Motives of love and devotion can become colored with self-centeredness. So love and devotion, you want to do good things, but you can become self-centered. You can start focusing on what you're going to get out of this instead of just doing it for the sake of doing it. Now, Jesus is teaching this, and he wants his disciples to learn this. So he says, beware, beware. Beware of practicing your righteousness in this way. This word beware means turn one's mind or attention to a thing by being on one's guard against it. In other words, you focus on making sure that you're not doing it for the wrong motives. And you have to continually pay attention to this. Why am I doing this? Am I doing it because I want to impress somebody? Am I doing it because I want people to say I'm a good guy? Moreover, beholding your mind on the matter of not practicing your correctness of thinking, feeling, and acting before men in order to be attentively viewed by them as a spectacular performer. Jesus is warning against self-centeredness. He is warning against doing it because you want the attention. Now, think about this. The disciples of Jesus are in this crowd and they are listening to this. These guys are going to receive the Holy Spirit, and they are going to receive the power of God in a very short time, tremendous power of God, so that they will be able to heal people. They will be able to rid people of demons, demon possession. They will have supernatural powers, these guys. And Jesus is teaching them to be very careful about why they do things, because look at the temptation that could come to them. I just healed this person from leprosy. Look at me. I just helped this person get rid of the demons from their life. And you could start doing all of these things, not because you want to help those people or because you want to glorify God, but because you want everybody to look at you. I'm important. I'm special. And we do the same thing in Christianity. We like to impress others. You see? So Jesus is teaching about righteousness. Beware of practicing your righteousness. See, there are two kinds of righteousness, two varieties of righteousness. One variety of righteousness is you do it to look good, to impress others. And that's called self-righteousness. You see? That's one variety. The other one is different. The other one is rightness of heart. The other one is righteousness that is opposite of sin. When you look at the word sin and what does it mean, sin is defined as missing of the mark set by God. Righteousness is the opposite of sin. In other words, you're hitting the mark that God has set for your life. So what is this righteousness that Jesus is talking about? The word righteousness comes from a word that means straightness. Righteousness is a moral concept. Listen to this. God's character is the definition and source of all righteousness. God's character is the definition of all righteousness. So what is the second kind of righteousness that we need to practice? God-pleasing righteousness is all that God is, all that He commands, all that He demands, all that He approves, all that He provides through Jesus Christ. In the present context, righteousness is the general description for acts of devotion and religious duty which conform to the will of God. Righteousness before men to be noticed by them is self-righteousness. Righteousness that God accepts is what? It's His character reproduced in us. You see, so you're not talking anymore just about doing things. You're talking about your heart. You're talking about your mind. You're talking about your soul. Righteousness that God accepts is His character reproduced in and through us for His good pleasure. So we're talking about the complete, when Jesus is talking about doing good deeds, He's talking about reflecting character of God. He's talking about totally pure motivation. Motivation has nothing to do with self, me, us, church. You know. The Adventist church too, we love to brag about things, you know, that we have done in the schools and the hospitals and all of that nonsense, you know. It's all good stuff, but we love to market, you know, who we are, how good we are. And we do it on a personal, on an individual level as well. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see what? Your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. That's why good works should be done. To glorify God who is in heaven, not to glorify us or our institutions or anything else that we do. So we're looking at this, you know, process that the disciples have gone through, and what I am wanting you to have in mind is How can I grow? How can I improve my spirituality and my closeness to God? So we're looking at this stuff, and there is stuff here that we can apply in our own life. The greatest hindrance in right motives is the desire to please yourself rather than the Lord. Now look at this. Ultimately, our only reason for pleasing men around us, why we want to please people around us, is that we may please ourselves. Our real desire is not to please others as such. We want to please them because we know that if we do, they will think better of us. And this is why we do things. A lot of times we do good things because we want other people to think better of us. Oh, I spent 40 years as a missionary in Africa, and I had to eat dirt and, walk barefoot all my life, and I'm here. Such a great guy am I, I mean, this is just maybe a little extreme, but this is how most people think. We want to do things because we want people to think better of us. In other words, we are pleasing ourselves and are merely concerned about self-gratification. A famous preacher, Spurgeon, said, "You cannot expect to be paid twice. If therefore you take your reward in the applause of men who give you a high character for generosity, you cannot expect to have any reward from God." You cannot expect to be paid twice. Why are we doing what we are doing? It's interesting to me that Jesus wanted his disciples to learn this lesson in the beginning of the ministry. This is one of the first lessons that Jesus is teaching them. The proper motivation for everything that we as Christians are going to do. What motivates you? Is it to please God, or is it to look good in the eyes of somebody else? The motive which leads a man to give will form the true estimate of what he does. If he gives to be seen of men, then when he is seen of men, he has the reward he sought for, and he will never have any other. Let us never do our alms before men to be seen of them. And that's exactly what Jesus said in verse 2. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. So, this chapter is talking about the three religious practices: giving, praying, and fasting. So in this chapter, as you read through all three of these, you're going to find this word repeated over and over again: your Father who is in secret, who sees in secret. When you give, give in secret. When you pray, pray in secret. When you fast, fast in secret. Don't do it in a way so that everybody else sees it. If the action is not done in the Lord's service, but with a view to our own honor, we cannot expect a reward from above. Now, here, something that we need to understand. When you receive glory from men, you receive no reward from your Father in heaven. When you receive glory from men, you receive no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Why? Because his name is Kana, which means jealous. And he declared in Isaiah 48:11, "For my own sake, For my own sake I will act. For how can my name be profaned? And my glory I will not give to another. God is a jealous God. That's how He is. If you receive glory from men, you're not going to receive glory from God. And Paul talks about this in a similar way in Colossians. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do all in the name of Lord Jesus, giving thanks through Him to God the Father. Whatever you do, do your work heartily, as for the Lord, rather than for the men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. You know what I learned from this as I was studying this? A very clear sense of liberation. Because Jesus is teaching us here, don't worry about what anybody is thinking. Don't worry about looking good in front of men. Don't worry about doing good deeds so other people can see you. You don't need to care about what anybody is thinking about you. You need to care about what God is thinking about you. You need to do it in such a way that you please God. So to me, I think, and to us as a church, there needs to be a sense of liberation. I've been telling you in this church, we welcome everybody. Safe place for sinners. Because whatever your sin is, it's not any greater than mine or anybody else's. And we are all on the journey to become better people. You see, so we don't have to worry about, the only thing that bothers me in a church more than anything is when somebody has the nerve to judge somebody else. And I fought against this in this church for 20 years. Well, not so much anymore, but there was a time. And in many other churches. See, we don't have to worry about anybody else. We only have to worry about God and how He's going to see us and how He's going to judge us. And notice here that Jesus condemns the motive and not the deed. You can do good things, but what is the motive? In Proverbs, Solomon says, the crucible is for silver and the furnace for gold, and the man is tested by the praise accorded him. How do you react to when people criticize you? How do you react when they praise you? You can tell a lot about a person by how they react to these things. So, wages or reward, what is it? To both the Greek and Hebrew mind, the idea of reward had to do with the wholeness of an action, or stated another way, with the completion of a deed. If you work for somebody for a whole day, at the end of the day you get paid. It's all one act. It's not two separate things, getting paid and working. It's all one. You work, you get paid. That's part of it. When you do good deeds, at the completion of the deed, the Jews understood there was a reward. If you do a good deed, there is a reward from God. That's just the way things are. But that reward, again, depends on the motivation that was in your heart in the first place. So, this sentence is very interesting. The principle that all believers need to understand is that it is possible for a believer to perform ostensibly wonderful deeds and yet receive no reward from God. So we can be good Christians, we can do great deeds, but if it is done with the wrong motivation, we will receive absolutely zero reward from God because we already got our reward. They put us on TV, They praised us. They told us how great we are. They told us how wonderful we are. So that's it. That's our reward. So as we look at this, how do we look at this in our own life, personal life? Your life, my life. When you look at yourself, your character, your personality, the things that you do, why do you do good things? You do good things in secret so nobody knows? Or do you do it because you want a little bit of a credit? Why do we do it? Now, the right way of doing it. When we serve God in secret, we receive a double reward. Not only will God one day reward us openly, but we will also enjoy the fact that we did it in secret. Thomas Lamons, I think he was a preacher, he wrote the following little story. Several years back, I was lounging around in the living room, listening to the radio when my dad came in from shoveling snow. He looked at me and said, "In 24 hours, you won't even remember what you're listening to now. How about doing something for the next 20 minutes that you will remember for the next 20 years? I promise that you'll enjoy thinking about it every time." "What is it?" I asked. "Well, son, there are several inches of snow on Mrs. Brown's walks," he replied. "Why don't you go see if you can shovel it off and get back home before she knows who did it?" So he said, at that point, I did a walk in about 15 minutes. She never knew who did the job, and my dad was right. It's been a lot more than 20 years, and I've enjoyed the memory every time I've thought about it. You know, we can do a lot of times, we can do in 20 minutes something that we're going to remember for the rest of our lives. That's one kind of reward right there. Then on top of that, you're getting a reward from God because you did it that way. You did it for Him. You didn't do it for yourself. Jesus said that when we do good to get man's applause, we have our reward. Instead, let's do things for God in secret so that nobody knows. I wonder if we as a church together were to conspire to do some good things in this neighborhood without anybody ever knowing that it was this church. I wonder how God will look at it. Wonder if we got, painted somebody's house or cleaned the creek that runs right here less than half a mile from our church. Go over there with trash bags in the spring and pick up all the trash. Not tell anybody who we are. I wonder if that's the way to do good deeds this year for God. Not just as a church, but as individuals. So nobody knows. Would you be able to do something good and not even tell your wife about it? Not brag a little bit, "Oh, honey, I did such a good thing today." Would you be able to do something good and not tell anybody? Just not tell anybody. Just between you and God. Just because you want to reflect the character of God. Not because you want anything in return for yourself. In China, not too far from Hong Kong, China, there is a place called Lowu Commercial City. It's a giant shopping mall. It has 500,000 square feet of shopping area. And millions of people go there every day to shop. And you can buy anything you want there. You can buy a gold Rolex watch on your hand for $58 because it's fake. It looks real. Yeah, I could personally. A buddy of mine showed me a gold Rolex watch, and I couldn't tell. I have no idea if it's real or not. It looked nice, real nice to me. You know, I can't tell. $58. You can buy clothes. You can buy $5,000 fancy suits for $100. Why? Because it's all fake. Gucci, Fendi, Chanel. What this world values is what's on the outside. It's what's on your wrist. How much is your suit? How fancy are your shoes? What kind of a car we drive? Why? Because everybody likes attention. Look at me. Look at me. I am good. I am big. I am important. I'm rich. I'm fancy. We want to please people. We want them to look at us and think that we are something that maybe oftentimes we are not. What Jesus was talking about here is he wanted them to be authentic. He wanted them not to worry about what the world was thinking. He wanted his disciples to learn this lesson early on. You are in the employment of God. And once you sign up for that, you don't work for others and you don't work for yourself anymore. You're not in the business for yourself anymore. And once you walk into church, and you commit to God and you get baptized and you decide to follow Jesus, you don't work for others anymore. Your reward is not from other people. You're not here to please Pastor Gordon. I'm not here to please you. I want you to think good of me, but I don't need to do things in order that you would think good of me. I need to worry about what God thinks of me and my job. And so do we all. Oh, how we fear to drop our masks. We know so well what lies within. Yet Christ could use our lives to bless if we would first be cleansed from sin. And then this. And this is, I want you to hear this. The harder you work at what you should be, the less you'll try to hide what you are. What should we be? Jesus says, be you perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. We should reflect the character of God in everything that we do. And once we start asking God for help to do that, because obviously none of this is our own doing. We need God's help. We need the Holy Spirit to do this. But once we ask Him, hey, Lord, help me. I want to be how Jesus was. I want to reflect your character. I want to help people because that's what you want me to do, not because I want to be seen by anybody else. I don't want even anybody to know that I'm doing this stuff for you. I don't want anybody to know. I'm just going to do it because you want it done. Once you do that, you stop worrying about who you are and what people see. You quit worrying about what impression you're going to make on anybody else. Because you're focusing on God. Focusing on pleasing Him. and nobody else. These are the kind of lessons that I would like us to explore for the rest of this year here in this church. And I think, you study this stuff 30, 40, 50 weeks in a year, I think we can cover a lot of ground and learn a lot of ways to start reflecting God's character a little bit better in our own lives. So I hope that this helped. I hope you'll be back next Sabbath. And I hope that you'll stay and eat some cake, right? Debbie, we have a lot of cake.